أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to our discovery journey, how Islamic civilization and sciences impacted the West. This is part 6. And I'm your presenter, HafiAl Rawahy. This part will focus on two areas: trade and commerce and agriculture. And these are the references that I've used to prepare this talk. So we start with trade and commerce. Trade and commerce have a long tradition in Islam. Even the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companion were participating or were involved in trade and commerce. What is interesting is trade and commerce in the Muslim world were governed by a well-developed body of Islamic legislations and rules that are based on the Quran and on Sunnah and on Maqasid al-Sharia, which covers various areas or aspects of trade and commerce, including contracts, bills of exchange, bills of payment, personal and commercial loans, also associations and partnerships, and general market conduct. Now, for a millennium, Muslim world was a powerhouse of scientific knowledge, innovation, and cultural influence, and therefore it is naturally that all this was driven by a massive economy with international trade and commerce that link all the three known continents that Europe, Africa, and Asia. Now, also Muslim craftsmen and entrepreneurs, they were producing a variety of highly demanded goods across many industries and at a very fast rate and with great leaps in technology. Quoting a historian, Alfred E. Leiber, from his writings, Eastern Business Practices and Medieval European Commerce, he said, the merchants of Italy and other European countries, they obtained their first education in the use of sophisticated business methods from their Muslim counterparts. And he was referring at the time when Europe was starting to pull itself from the Dark Age. So we're talking about around the 12th, 13th century. He also said that the Arabs not only extended their military conquest, but also succeeded in developing long-distance trade and international commerce on a scale which surpassed anything known before. And of course, that time, it was favorable for the Muslim to have this unhindered growth in trade and commerce. Now, starting from the 12th century, when Europeans, they began to experience this economic revival as they were moving away from Dark Ages, the first country or city-states of Italy, they were the first one to experience economic revival because they were participating in trade and commerce just by being in the close proximity within Mediterranean. So you have these city-states, Pisa, Florence, Genoa, Venice. There's a lot has been written about trade. And Sicily, of course, it was Muslim. And then by 12th, 13th century, it was already taken by the Normans. And therefore, these are the areas that actually started to experience. So Italy has a big role in the rise of trade and commerce mechanism in the West, just because of its link with the Muslim world. Now, Italian merchant ships, they already began to frequent Muslim ports in the North Africa, in Egypt, in Anatolia, all right, all the way even in the Fertile Crescent for merchandise exchange. And this is where merchants were exposed to Muslims' trade and commercial practices. But more important, it was the introduction of the Arabic numerals and the decimal system and the Arabic accounting system. And it started in Italy, and then it went to the rest of Europe through intellectuals like Leonardo Fibonacci and others. This had more impact on the European trade and commercial practices because now they could, they could organize their trade and commerce in terms of bookkeeping. This is the time when they introduced double entry bookkeeping, calculations. They could do easy calculation for money exchange, easy calculation for weights and measures, for profit margins and proportions. It made life easier with this Arabic numerals and Arabic accounting system. Merchants that were arriving in a Muslim port, which were already well organized, they had to go through the bureaucracy of custom clearance, which was part of the public bureaucracy of public civil and fiscal administration system, which was referred as the Royal Diwan. And they obtained first-hand experience into advanced methods of Muslim trade and commerce. And now European business vocabulary began to reflect Muslim trade and commercial concepts and tools, with the terms like contracts, revenues, expenditure, tariff, checks, and many of these terms. And they develop Latinized versions of the original Arabic terms, and soon they came into everyday use in the medieval European trade and commerce. You have examples here of European business vocabulary that has been adopted directly from Islamic trade and commercial practices. And you have these, different versions, because you have many in the modern European languages, the same word, it could have slight different spelling and slight different pronunciation. But all these terms, originality, they come from Arabic. For example, tariff, it comes from tarif, and the traffic, it comes from tafriq, or distribution. Check, it comes from saq, and magazine, or you have different versions of that. It comes from makhazin. And there are many more. These are just some examples. You have this term that is used, tear weight, which comes from tarha, caliber, simsar, essentially, and you have different version depending on from where it was adopted, whether from Italian first or from Spanish areas. Also, the Muslim contributed in the development of civil and financial administrative structures in Europe, starting with the Norman rulers who conquered Sicily from the Muslims. They adopted the best administrative practices and institutions that were inherited from the Muslim administration in Sicily. And they incorporated them into the Norman system, and they applied them in the administration of all their domains. And the Normans, they controlled many areas in Europe at that time. So they were, they had kingdoms in Sicily, part of Italy, in Anatolia, in France, in England, and even in Germany. Again, quoting a historian, David C. Douglas, in his book, The Norman Achievements, he said, monarchies established by the Normans control the best organized kingdoms of Europe. This success was, however, not due merely to the fact of conquest, but it derived also from a particular administrative policy, which was everywhere adopted by the Normans in all the states they governed. The Normans were concerned to give fresh vitality to the administrative institution which they found in the conquered lands. Now, just to give you an example, the English exchequer that was introduced in England in the 12th century by Thomas Brown. Also, he carries Arabic title, Qaid Brown, who had served King Roger II in Sicily, where he learned and mastered the Sicilian exchequer, which was part of the royal diwan, which was part of the Muslim bureaucracy or administrative system of civil and the financial system. The exchequer consisted of a complete national treasury accounts that calculated and recorded government revenues and expenditures using the Arabic numerals and Arabic accounting system. So today we're looking at the English exchequer as an example, but actually its roots, it comes from the Arabic system. There are also Muslim literature related to trade and commerce, which was centuries ahead of Europeans. For example, to quote Al-Shaybani's Kitab al-Iktisab fil al-Rizq and Al-Dimashqi's Kitab al-Ishara ila Mahasin al-Tijara. These two books, they formulated economic concept of free market, which later, 500 years later, influenced European Renaissance thinkers like Adam Smith and others. More influential was the 14th century Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, which is available in English translation if anybody is interested to read, which formulated the economic theories of production, of consumption, distribution, labor market, taxes, value, money, even economic growth. Ibn Khaldun is considered as the father of the field of economics and has heavily influenced Western economic thought. He laid down the foundation of what Western economic thinkers like Keynes and others who came later, to build upon. I remember this quotation, President Reagan, the late President Reagan, who was the 40th president, who died in 2004, he cited Ibn Khaldun as an early exponent of supply-side economic theory, on which his administration claimed to have based most of his economic policies. And Reagan had a very successful economic policies. Even, the people they're studying today, and popularly they refer to as Reaganomics. You can read this from New York Times 1981 article. Just for some of you who might be interested, what is supply-side economics theory? This theory holds that increasing supply of goods translate to countries' economic growth. That means what Reagan's administration did, they formulated a fiscal policy that cut taxes, lowered interest rates, deregulated industry in order to increase production and therefore to grow their economy. And this idea, they got it straight from the 14th century Muslim thinker Ibn Khaldun. Amazing. There was a vast network of trade and commerce that stretched over the Muslim world, consisting of a diverse collection of merchants and goods. Travelers in those days, they travel or they flowed along with their goods, whether in land trades with caravans or in sea trade. Unlike today, technology, you can order things without needing to travel. The port of Malaga in southern Spain was center of immense traffic, and it was visited by traders from all over the known world at that time. Also, Alexandria was also a major port of the mouth of the Nile Delta, spilling into the Mediterranean Sea. The land trade passing along the Silk Route connecting the Middle East and Asia, and you have the sea trade passing along the spice route connecting the Mediterranean shore of North Africa and Europe, and for goods coming by sea from Indian Ocean and through Red Sea. So these are the major routes. Now, Muslim caravans were huge processions of people, their goods and animals that travel enormous distances, and they reach the farthest horizons. These traders who went as far as China in their caravans along the Silk Route that bound the distant lands to India, to Persia, to Syria, Egypt, all the way to Spain. And the traders exchange commodities of every country, so it gives opportunity people to, as they move, to buy and sell along the way. So they exchange things like silk, jewelries, pottery and glass, textile, weapons, soaps, carpets, all sorts of things. There was service stations also called caravansaries along the roads at interval of 30 kilometers that facilitated trade caravans to stop and rest. Muslim caravansaries gave way to the idea of modern hotels today. Except the caravansary, they were operated as charitable foundations, and they provided the traveler with the shelter, food, medical facility for currency exchange, and of course entertainment, because they will stay sometimes for a few days. In the Muslim world, the use of gold and silver coins, dinars and dirhams, was the official mode of payment everywhere. And it was Umayyad Khalifa Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who ruled in the 7th and 8th century. He was the first Muslim ruler to actually mint his own currency to keep his rule independent from Byzantium. And he also wanted to unify the whole of the Muslim world with a single currency. So this idea of a single currency, it is not something new. It was a millennium years ago. But when stepping outside the Muslim world, the transactions were a different story. Ibn Battuta, the 14th century Muslim traveler, he wrote that the Maldives use cowrie shells, and China uses special paper as a form of money. Also, it's interesting to know that a banking system started during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph Harun Rashid. Use of sukuk or sak or check, Arabic for a written promissory note to honor payment, or a check. In fact, some people, they say the use of check, it started all the way during the time of Sayyidina Umar, because he paid using, as a promissory note, using check. But during the time of Caliph Harun Rashid, this was well organized, because a businessman could cash a check in China, in Guangzhou, China, that was drawn on his bank account in Baghdad. The coin that you see at the bottom, these are gold dinar coin. They bear the Islamic testimony of faith, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And it was made for King Offa of Mercia, England, who reigned about the same time as Khalifa Harun Rashid. So he was his contemporary. So it shows the importance of these gold dinars. Even some of the Western kingdoms, they adopted. Among the important commodities in the Muslim trade and commerce, it was carpets. And the carpets were made before Islam by Bedouin tribes of Arabia, Persia, and Anatolia. And they were used for various purposes. You can see as tents, as sheltering from storms, as a floor covering, many different areas, different usage of carpets. Now, carpets were held in high esteem and had inspired Muslims over a millennium for good designs, colors, materials, and different weaving techniques. And the Muslim carpets were highly prized, and therefore carpet making grew to become a huge industry, with producers receiving orders from all over Europe and elsewhere. Muslim carpets became known in Europe for their quality, for the good material, for their intricate design, and for their colorful and beauty. And they were expensive too, due to this quality material they use, but also because of the skills that is needed, and artistic work and human labor that is needed. But also, on the other hand, they retain value. So people, they will keep this carpet in order to retain to keep or to store their wealth. In Europe, Muslim carpets, they caught on quickly, very early on. And soon they became a status symbol in the royal palaces and houses of wealthy people. For example, King Henry VIII, who ruled England in the 16th century, he owned more than 400 Muslim carpets. And Europeans later on, especially in England and Belgium, they started to imitate production of carpets from the Muslim by using machines, starting from 18th century onwards. But people still have high regard for the handmade Muslim carpets, for their quality, for their material, for their design, for their beauty, and for their value retention. If we look at European paintings that were made in the late medieval period, like 14th, 15th century, you can see actually how Muslim carpets were used, and therefore reflect how people thought about them. So these famous paintings, the one at the top on the left is Madonna by Jan Bayek. I think is a Dutch artist, and you can see she's sitting on this beautiful Muslim carpet. So all the pictures, especially these religious paintings, they were using the Muslim carpets with nice Islamic designs. And even today, Muslim carpets have remained in the West as part of interiors for public buildings and private homes, especially of wealthy people. These pictures of rooms in the White House, and they all have these nice carpets from the East. Another important commodity in the trade and commerce during that time is textile. So textile were a commodity that also drove much of the medieval trade and became exceptionally important for the world economy, actually, not just for the Muslim. So Muslim had advantage in the production of cotton, for example, in places like Egypt and India. And by mid-9th century, the textile industry of Muslim Spain had earned international reputation and it really fascinated Europeans. So Andalusian silks with golden borders and ornamentations were favored for royal occasions in Europe. For example, Andalusian silk was used in the marriage of Portugal Queen Beatrice, and Pope Sylvester II was buried in luxurious Persian silk clothes. Also, Castilian Queen Elena as a bride of King Edward I, was given Andalusian silk and carpets as a precious items for her dowry. That shows how important they were and how they were admired. Some cities were famous for their products. So each city kind of specializes in particular, aspect of textile. And some textile products still bear their Muslim names today. For example, muslin, it comes from Mosul in Iraq, and Damask, it comes from Damascus. These names are international today in all languages. If you can Google this in Italian or in German, or you can find these products from Amazon. If you put Damask, or if you put baldaquin, or gauze, you will get a lot of products return on this. So Damask comes from Damascus, and baldaquin comes from Baghdad. Gauze comes from Gaza, and satin comes from Zaytuni, or named. It's a city port that was named by Muslim. The port is in China, but this is where they imported the material from. And fine silk and velvet also came from Turkey and Bursa, and was famous. Bursa was famous for its silk weavers who produce stunning textile and pieces for interior decorations, and that was used in royal palaces. Another area that is important is pottery. For more than a millennia, Muslim lands produce some of the world's finest ceramic and pottery that were traded for multiple purposes. So people, they use this as ornaments. They use to clad walls, which we still do it today. They use for cooking, for serving food, and for all different kind of things. And there were pots that were glazed, and there were some that were unglazed, but always decorated with beautiful and colorful floral calligraphy and motifs. In the East, ceramic and pottery centers were concentrated around Baghdad and Samarra in Iraq. And the ceramic and pottery artisans in Iraq developed their own unique processes of producing them, and they metallize, the ceramic. They look like metal objects. In the West, ceramic and pottery, they concentrated in Spain, in Turkey, and also in North Africa, places like Tunisia and Morocco in particular. Now, in the 12th century, Spanish Muslim replaced Byzantine mosaic, which was, until that time, it was the main product that was used, to clad buildings. It was used in, as a media of art. So they replaced that with ceramic tiles, and the favorable colors are blue, red, and white, and they covered with geometric design, also with the floral and with calligraphic patterns, as you can see. Turkey was also a thriving ceramics and pottery center because of the craftsmen crowded at cities like Konya, Bursa, Iznik, and many of these artisans, they moved to Turkey when Mongols invaded Iraq. So some of the artists that were in Iraq, they moved to Turkey. So a typical Iznik decoration was painted on a slip in cobalt blue, turquoise, green, and red, with popular flowers they use for either rose or jasmine or carnation or tulip. You can see the picture at the bottom. Also, 13th and 14th century, Syria and Egypt were great centers of glass industry. Muslim had inherited the famous Roman glass industry in Syria and Egypt during the Byzantine rule. But the Muslim, they advance it, with their science and innovations and technology, they advance the techniques. So among the three known techniques, they have this double stamping, in which decorative designs were pressed onto hot glass, as you can see the picture in the middle. And then you have a free-form glass blowing with a thread decoration, as you can see the picture on the right, top right, or mold blowing, where liquid glass is blown into a prepared mold and then engraved, and cutting is done by hand or by a wheel. This glass object that you see at the top, like a vase, I got this picture as I was preparing for this talk. I Googled this, and it says this object was sold for 200,000 pounds. This little vase, just as a sort of a rare object, to reflect on it, to appreciate the artwork that was done in the past. Samarra also in Iraq, they had the glassmakers, and they were renowned for making small bottles for things like perfumes, in fruit shapes, and they have this in green, in blue, and in yellow glass. Excavations at Al-Fustat, the old Cairo, indicate that from the 8th century onwards, Cairo, Egypt must have been a center of production of fine glasses in variety of colors. Some of the most sophisticated Egyptian glass vessels were decorated with the luster or the shiny metallic effect, and made by painting copper or silver oxide on the surface. And in the West, cities like Almeria and Murcia, Malacca, in Muslim Spain, also, they had reputation for producing fine glass. And it is understood that in the 9th century, Abbas ibn Firnas is the one who introduced this glass industry in Spain. So this is an area related to trade and commerce. And now we're going to move into area of agriculture. Today, we consume varieties of food that is not necessarily grown here locally. Everything comes from abroad, and, we can experience things from all over the world. But over a millennium ago, Muslims enjoyed also varieties of food that was locally produced. And the farmers were making all kinds of agricultural innovations at that time. They introduced new crops from all around the world. And it was interesting because Muslims, the Muslim civilization cover all the three continents. So you had the varieties. So Muslims also developed intensive irrigation systems and farming techniques, utilizing global knowledge, their knowledge of all these geographies they cover, but they will apply for local conditions. And also because they could use now scientific methods, because they have science, and they could experiment things. And they also promoted practical farming, which included new and innovative land ownership options. Because in Europe at that time, you had all these big landlords who owned the lands, and people, they work like slaves. But in the Muslim world, they introduced individual land ownership. So the Islamic agricultural revolution, it actually transformed the medieval regions, not only of the Middle East, but of the Western Mediterranean and the rest of Europe. And its legacy, it can be seen today. If we look at the landscapes, the farmland, the gardens of those regions. Also in the variety of crops that you can find today in Europe, and their Arabic origin names as well. In the agricultural system as well, agricultural terminology and institutions relating to irrigation, like the water tribunals, which are famous in Spain, in Portugal, in Sicily, and we can find that in Oman as well. We have these water tribunals related to affluage, and you can find that also in the Philippines, even in North and South America, where it was introduced by the Spaniards. And Muslim also collected a corpus knowledge of earth sciences, because they grasped the importance and careful use of the earth resources long before Europeans. And they paid a lot of attention to the earth sciences and the environment. Therefore, Muslim scientists, they investigated, they classified, they documented information about almost everything: rocks, soils, flora, fauna, domestic and wild animals of every region. And they compiled this lengthy inventory of zoological and botanical species with a thorough analysis and classification. This huge corpus of knowledge of our sciences helped to advance agriculture and animal husbandry. Also, Islamic civilization was truly a civilization of travelers, whether for trade and commerce, but also more important for pilgrimage, or which combine the two. So Muslim combed the known world for knowledge and information, related, environment and related to earth sciences. And this is what really helped them to produce this huge agricultural knowledge base and manuals as well. They produced a lot of books and manuals related to agriculture. These were spectacular cultural union of scientific knowledge from the past and the present, all the way from the Levant, from North Africa, from Persian, and even from India, China, and Andalusia. The Muslim world was a large unified region which was very receptive to new ideas. At that time, people were very much open to new ideas. And also they had the infrastructure to diffuse these new ideas easily. Wherever they start, something could start in Spain, but in a matter of a month, you will find it spread across the Muslim world. And the attitude, the social structure, the institution, the infrastructure, and the traveling, and the scientific progress, the economic development, all of this played a part, not only in agriculture, but in many other industries and in trade and commerce in general. So with this vast array of knowledge coming from a diversity of geographic areas, Muslim, they reared the finest horses and sheep. They cultivated the best orchards, grains, fruits, and vegetables. And they knew how to fight insect pests, how to use fertilizers, how to irrigate effectively. And they were experts in crop rotation, grafting trees, and cross-planting trees to produce new varieties. So these ideas are not new. These ideas, they have been with us for a millennium. In the ancient Mediterranean world, so in Europe, mainly winter crops were grown, and each field will give only one harvest every 2 years. And that was before Muslim arrived in Andalusia and Sicily with new techniques of crop rotation, irrigation, as well as new crops from other parts of the Muslim world. So with the Muslim introduction of new farming techniques, they were able now to produce 4 harvests each year. and they could produce, they could do this with the numerous crops. Free movement of people from very different climates and agricultural traditions facilitated not only the diffusion of crops and plants, but also the know-how on how to grow them. So Muslim agriculture was also advanced by the fertile intellectual climate of scientific inquiry, because science and experimentation, among the botanists and agronomists, it really helped, to advance, and therefore Muslims introduced many of these new things into Europe, which were not available before. Muslims introduced new crops, mainly fruits, grains, and vegetables, but also plants that were used for other uses, like for fibers, spices, beverages, medicines, dyes, for perfumes, for cosmetics, even timber and fodder, okay, as well as the flowers, garden flowers and ornamental plants. Subtropical crops like bananas, coconut, and mango were introduced in the European coastal regions, and these crops have survived today in the Canary Islands of Spain. When we say we introduce things, many people now, they kind of forget. For example, tulip is one of the most important flower in Holland. And they export probably in millions to the world. But actually this flower was introduced by the Muslim. Other new crops that were introduced by Muslim in Europe, including rice, sugarcane, citrus fruits, peaches, pomegranates, apricot, artichoke, all of these, even silk production, saffron, spinach. Some of the European countries have become exporters, producers and exporters of this product, especially Spain and Portugal and Italy, Sicily. So at the peak of Islamic agricultural revolution, reported by various 9th and centuries writers such as Al-Jahiz and Ibn Rusta and Al-Sari, and they were talking about variety of products to save the same crop. For example, there were 360 types of dates in places like Iraq. There were 78 kinds of grapes, 36 types of pears, all right, or 28 types of figs. All right, this is just show how robust the agriculture at that time. These are examples of European names of vegetables and fruits that have Arabic origin, because they come from from the Muslim world, and they were introduced in the West by the Muslim. Like interesting, like oranges, they come from naranj. Now there are some Omanis here using this naranj, but maybe this, I'm not sure whether it comes from Arabic or it comes from Persia to Arabic. But things like tamarind, which is tamarhind, saffron, za'afaran. Yes, Dr. Saleh, what did you say? All right, just to give you a story of orange and citron fruits, this, I read this from Al-Masudi. He's a 10th century Muslim traveler and historian, and he wrote about the introduction of orange and citron trees to Europe. He said the orange tree, or Shajarat al-Naranj, and the citron tree, Shajarat al-Utruj al-Mudawwar, were brought from India around 10th century, and were first planted in Oman. And then from Oman, they were carried via Basra into Iraq and then Syria. And in a very short time, they became popular in the gardens of the people of Iraq and Syria and other frontier coastal towns. Very quickly, the trees were sprouting up over Antioch in Turkey, Palestine in Egypt, and later Andalusia and Sicily. And today, Oman imports oranges from Egypt and Spain. Spain and Sicily are also major exporters of oranges to other European countries. And it was the Spaniards who introduced orange farming to their colonies in North America and South America. So even if you get oranges from Florida, those are oranges that originally have a connection to Oman. Also, the Muslim were innovative in the area of irrigation. Crops were now grown in all season, and including hot summers, and therefore crops, they needed more water than what was available, such as sugarcane, rice, cotton. All of these require a lot of water. There is a historian, Ibn Basal, who said the sugarcane had to be watered every week. Cotton had to be watered every 2 weeks. And rice had to be continuously submerged in water. And this is true because this is what we see today, how they irrigate these crops. Muslims became experts in raising water to guarantee a constant flow of by using both mechanical pumps and mechanical water wheels, or norias. You can find these in Syria today, and in Spain as well. In Valencia, which is the agricultural part of Andalusia, it had 8,000 water wheels, or more than 8,000 water wheels, which were built to take water to the rice plantation and other farms. And Muslims built upon the traditional use of animals to power machineries, but also they devised advanced mechanical gears and wheels, and dug underground canals, these fallages and canals, to take water through harsh, barren deserts. These are things that we can find in Oman. We can find them in Iran. We can find them in Spain, and they have been taken even in South America, in the Philippines. So for the water to make it to the field, the level of irrigation system had to be correctly calculated. And the Muslim had advantage because they had this knowledge of mathematics, of astronomy, or science of botany and zoology. It all helped. And water disputes were resolved through water tribunals. We already talked about that, which administered by farmers themselves. And this concept of water tribunals, it was taken to other parts of the world. Okay, so the water tribunal in Spain and in Portugal, this is something, a regular thing you can find even today. All right, and this is the way they resolve disputes. The last important factor of Islamic agricultural revolution that resulted in the boom in food production was the development of this new and vigorous system of land ownership. And this was moving away from medieval feudal system of European societies, where peasants work in misery, suffering, and exploitation of these big landowners. But farmers in the Muslim world could now work freely for themselves, their families, and their communities, because individuals had the right to buy, to sell, to mortgage, to inherit, to rent a farmland, and directly benefit from the output produced from the land. And this was something quite innovative because it was not there in Europe. So Islamic contracts, also recognized by the court system, enable this process, because where every transaction involving another person, whether related to agriculture or industry or trade or employment, it required signing a contract between parties. Also, for a farm or a crop to bloom, there should be not only ecological balance between nature, but also between nature, what the human intervention, what we should do. All right. And therefore, Muslim, they started systematic study of agriculture, including soil chemistry, soil erosion, hundreds of years ago. And Muslim agriculture was quite a sophisticated affair, which resulted in an ecologically friendly and very productive system, not like the system today. We are all complaining and suffering of these agricultural products that come with a lot of chemicals, harmful chemicals. The Muslim were much conscious at that time with, balancing, the environment. They had farming books or manuals that explain just about everything in details. All right. You have a list here of some of the literature. Okay, and many of these manuscripts are available, and many of them have been translated into other languages, in English and French and Latin and other languages. The one that is very interesting I want to highlight is Kitab al-Falaha by Ibn al-Awam. This is a 12th century Andalusian botanist who researched previous agricultural studies of earlier civilization of Greeks and Egyptians and the Persians, and he wrote this book, or the Book of Agriculture. This book is the most comprehensive and the most important medieval work on agriculture. And it was the first to be translated to European language. The cover that you see on the right is a French one. I read the English. The English version is available, so you can Google and you can read the English version. So Ibn al-Awam was well read in the writing of his previous experts, because he cited more than 120 authors. And his book is quite big, actually. It has almost 34 chapters, and he covered all areas. Okay, for example, he described cultivation of 585 different plants, more than 50 fruit trees. And he makes observation on areas of grafting, soil properties and preparation, fertilizers and use. So these books, even if you read them today, you'll find them beneficial. For example, just to give you an idea about the level of details, on olives, you will find this book is quite impressive because it covers all the farmer could want to know about olives, from how to grow the trees, the treatment of olive tree diseases, method of grafting olive trees, harvesting olives, to the type and properties of olive, to refining olive oil and their conditioning. In addition, the book covered all the farmer could want to know on the environmental condition for growing olive trees in terms of plowing techniques, frequency, times for sowing, and how to sow, how to water, all of these details. It also covers, very interesting, on fertilizers. The book discusses about natural fertilizers from the pigeons, which was popular at that time. And because this is environmental friendly and organic. And I think this system may be still used in Iran, because I read that in Iran, the whole of Iran's landmass is dotted with this pigeon keeping large circular towers for breeding pigeons and collecting their dung as organic fertilizers. And these towers are huge, and they are about 20 meters high, and they are made from mud bricks, and they have these pigeon holes. Maybe this idea of pigeon holes came from here. Also, Muslim, they advance in these mechanisms for dealing with water. I mentioned this before, because at that time, in most of the parts of the world, people, they didn't have running water, and people had to walk miles to a river or to a wadi or to a well to collect water using a bucket. And the Muslim introduced the idea of running water. So they devised new techniques to catch, to channel, to store, and to lift water. And they made ingenious combination of available devices, drawing on their own knowledge and that of other civilization. So we talk about these large water wheels or norias, but also they develop suction pumps, like the picture that you see at the top on the left, Al-Jazari pump, and the other one is Al-Taqaddin 6-cylinder valve that was used to siphon water. And of course, you have the picture of Norias. This one is in Hamas in Syria. There was also water management, culture. Water is essential for agriculture and sustenance, and therefore Muslim inherited these traditional techniques of irrigations, which later modified and improved, and even they constructed new ones. And their engineering progress was a result of their advanced knowledge in mathematics and in hydrology. Hydrology was a field that was much older, because many people, they think hydrology is something new today. But, and Muslim, they developed a lot of machinery, for building irrigation devices. Now, 11th century Persian mathematician and engineer Muhammad al-Qaraj wrote about bringing to the surface of hidden waters, bringing to the surface. And he discussed surveying instruments, the instrument to survey, and method of detecting sources of water, and instructions of excavation of underground is conduits or affluage, right? 14th century Egyptian historians Al-Nuwairi and Makrizi, he stressed on the role of dams and waterways for maintenance of the Nile from flooding. And they use this instrument, as you see the picture on the left. This is called Nilometer. It is in Rawahy in Egypt, which keep track of the level of the River Nile. And on the right, this is the level. They can tell, the worst condition when the water is very low. People, they can go on hunger, and when it overflow, it can cause disaster. And they know the level where that will be considered as a happiness or secured position. Dams are some of the largest civil engineering structures to be built and in the Muslim world, and they played a vital role. Without dams, these floods will have ravaged lands, and there will have been no hydro energy to pump water for large-scale irrigation. And Muslims, they, because of mathematics and engineering, they knew how to build these different kind of dams, different kind of structures, and many of these have survived. And among the ones who survived, you have the pictures, Kibar Arch Dam in Iran, and there's Wadi al-Kabir in Spain. Also, Muslim, dealt with windmills. Windmills were first introduced in the Muslim world by a Persian during the reign of Khalifa Umar ibn Khattab. Soon, windmills became widely used as a source of energy to run millstones for grinding wheat, corn, and flowers, all right? And even to draw up water for irrigation. Masoudi, he wrote, he described, the region, the Muslim world, as a region, as a country of wind and sand. And the power of wind is used to drive pumps for watering gardens. So he was describing these windmills in the 10th century. This picture that you see is actually a model of windmill from Islamic civilization is on display in one of the German museums. So energy is needed to power all machines, but before oil and gas, the Muslim world, they use sustainable energy sources. And it's amazing now people also talking about going back to sustainable energy sources. Dr. Yusuf, do you want to give me 5 minutes or should I stop here?
You can continue, Sheikh. I think this is your last slide according to the material you have. Yeah,
Okay.
continue.
All right. So for a millennium, energy in the Islamic world came primarily from water that was harnessed in machines like crank rod systems and pumps, as we've seen, people like Al-Jazari and Taqaddin and others who introduced this, and they use these mills also to dry. They use the windmills to grind grains. Another source of energy in the vast desert of Arabia was the wind, and therefore this is common because the desert, you've got a lot of winds. Early windmills were a very huge structure, like two-story buildings, and they were built on the towers of palaces, castles, or hilltops, or higher platform, as you can see the picture at the top. And on the upper story was the wheel where they capture the wind to turn, the wheel. And then at the bottom, you have the millstone, which is used here to grind the grains. But what is interesting is the introduction of windmill had a great effect on the science of mechanical engineering, because now, people started to think about mechanical engineering. And windmills were introduced to Europe in the 12th century by Crusades. Today, windmills are associated with Holland. When you talk about windmill, people, they think about Holland. And many people, even in Europe, they think they invented windmill. They forgot that this windmill in places like Holland they were actually introduced by the Muslims. Thank you. Now,